Good morning, guys. Welcome to this Saturday morning show. Renting out your home. I'm sure we could fill a whole hour by speaking about renting out your home, but it's really about getting it right and getting the legal and the financial and the personal peace of mind, I think, is the most important thing as well. A lot of landlords feel quite under pressure, especially a lot of the legislation and things that's surrounding the sector at the moment. So whether you're planning to be a landlord or whether you're planning to be a landlord or whether it's by accident, renting out your home could be the better choice for you as opposed to possibly selling. So if so, today's show is where you should be listening, because we're going to try and cover as much as we can. And there's a lot of reasons, Jim. I mean, perhaps you're maybe relocating for work, heading off on an exciting adventure. Maybe you've got a sabbatical, I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons. Or maybe you're looking just to create that extra income stream while maybe you're moving somewhere else or thinking about retirement and things as well. Lots of reasons. But regardless of why, there's plenty to navigate in the legal, the financial, and personal terms as well. So we're going to run through a guide today that hopefully will give you some insight into the best practices to do that for renting out your home. And we're going to cover a lot of those important areas with you this morning.
It's quite interesting because Steve Bartlett talks about in Diary of a CEO, when he talks about Airbnb, about the fact that he rents out his house when he's away. And I'm like, well, but then when you look at it, you look at Richard Branson. I mean, Richard Branson doesn't rent out his own house on Necker Island, but he rents out the rest of Necker Island for people that want to take it. You have to have 400,000 to do it, though.
I've seen Richard's place. Did you know? Accidentally wander.
I did wander into his house accidentally. But my point is, he does rent it out, and a lot of other people, quite successful people. Larry Page, across the water from him, as if I know Larry.
on the other island.
Across the water, actually rents out his island as well, in the British Virgin Islands, just across the. You can actually just see it standing on the beach at Necker. So it's actually quite interesting. Seen it happen, and Larry Page is actually demolishing his right now because he wasn't happy with the look at it. It's like it's going to be a 5-year project to resurrect it again. It's only a wee tiny wee island, but the thing is, you've got to get JCBs and you've got to get everything onto that island. So you've got to get boats to get it across because it's in the middle of nowhere, literally. So it's the logistics. It will slow it down. But interesting, you're renting your own home. That then makes me ask the question: then, are we approaching a point where we are back at the accidental landlords? In other words, I can't sell my house for the value that I need for it. Therefore, I'm just going to rent it, and that will allow me to move on to my next house. Because that's what happened in the credit crunch. A lot of people refinanced their houses because they still had huge amounts of equity actually built up in their houses. They refinanced their houses, they took that equity out, and then they went and bought another house and kept the existing house and just rented it. And that's a great wealth builder, I would say, because everything up to that point in time is tax free because you lived in it. There is certain minor tax advantages to actually previously living in the property. There used to be huge tax advantages to do that, but the UK government's actually cut it back over time, and it's got less and less as a result of that, like the principal private residence rules, which is, if you've been in it and you can get the first 3 years or something like that tax free, and then you get the last 4 years up to 40,000 capital gains free as well if you go to sell it. I don't think that exists anymore, but it does exist in some shape or form, but it's a lot less than what it was. So definitely renting out your home. Another one is actually, if you live in the home, you can just rent it.
Yeah. Do you know, I've got a few people, and I can see Victor's joining in on the comments from YouTube. Morning, Victor. And Victor's saying he rents out 2 large rooms in his own home, and he has done for the last 15 months. And then soon you'll have another one in use. So so you could do that as well.
Oh, that's when you'll get the allowance. You'll get the personal allowance for that, for lodger's allowance or whatever. I can't remember what it's called. But you get an allowance. I think it's up to about £7,000 or £8,000 if you rent out a room in your home. Rent a room scheme. There you go. I think it's the rent a room scheme it's called, and you get an allowance if you rent out a room in your home towards that, and that was to allow people with bigger homes to then rent out a room if they don't need it all and they can't really move because of the circumstances, then make an income to actually keep the costs down, the running costs down of the property itself, because it's only just for themselves. which I think is a really good idea, especially if you're there's a. I was watching Diary of a CEO this morning. They were talking about the like a loan crisis, how people are, just things like the internet is actually disconnecting people from society because they're engaging with this and they're not engaging face to face with people.
The actual person, people.
Yeah, and yet there's certain things and there's certain, I think, chemicals and that you get as a result of actually face to face engagement with someone, rather than actually just constantly listening to podcasts or constantly talking to people online and actually not having any personal engagement. Hence the reason when you go out for a walk, you should just say hello to everybody as much as possible. That's what I would be saying. And that's just for the point of view that you never know where it's going to take you, and you've got a connection. You're getting a connection because some people will only say hello because they're just grumpy and they're maybe just in their own world when they're walking around with their head down. Well, their head down, and they've got bigger fish to fry, so to speak, and they're just thinking about something they need to sort out, and that's probably their thinking time. So they'll not really see you. It's amazing. It's like that when, what do you call him, the magician or the illusionist actually gets the bear to run on the stage when you're actually watching a trick. And then he says, "Did anybody notice the bear?" And it's like everybody's going, "No." And it's like he plays it back and he shows you the bear running on the stage and taking something off, and then just going away again. It's like, how did I miss that?
Because you're so focused on this.
Yeah, you're so focused on the one thing, and that's what happens with disconnect from society. So I think there's a lot to be answered for things like this, but there's huge benefits to using platforms like this and mediums like this. But there's a lot of disadvantages as well, and you just have to make sure you're wary of that.
Yeah, I think it's all about the balance as well. Obviously, we're on this today and we make full use of this. I mean, we're live on these platforms here. Jim and I are both streaming live on our phones via Instagram as well. And it's live and interactive, and we get a lot from that. But there's a lot to be said, like you said, from interacting with people face to face. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, and then bringing it back on topic about renting your home. And I did say, obviously, there's a lot of important areas and things to think about. So, what are they? And we'll run through these today as best we can in the time that we have. But firstly, I think should you be leaving your furniture is something that people think about. Ensuring that your actual finances add up as well. Creating that trouble-free tenancy. I mean, having things put in place correctly. Are you going to look after it yourself and self-manage? Are you going to use an agent to look after it during that time? And also the preparations of the home itself for actually renting it out, because there is a lot of compliance and legislation that you have to think about. So in short, all you need to avoid the common pitfalls and make that smooth transition that turns your happy home into a successful investment in that time is what we're going to cover today. And first off, if you've been living in a property and it is your home, possibly you're moving for work or whatever, you're going to think about, what am I going to do with all the furniture? Am I going to leave it? Am I going to take it with me? Am I going to put it in storage? So depending on whether you're moving, you could maybe be wondering whether it's best to rent out your home completely empty or with the furniture included. So these are the things that you need to consider. Now, firstly, long-term tenants, I could speak from experience, usually prefer to surround themselves with their own furnishings. And if it's a longer term tenancy, people who rent as part of their living have their own furnishings to make a proper home for themselves as they move, whether that be every few years or whatever, because it reflects their taste and it makes them feel at home. And ultimately, once you engage in a tenancy, it's the tenant's home. It's no longer yours for that time frame. That's something that people tend to forget, Jim. When there's a tenancy in place, it's their home, not yours.
I never recommend leaving furniture. I think it's the easiest option for a lot of people. It's like, I'll just leave my furniture. And it's like, well, who wants your furniture?
I know.
A lot of people just don't want your furniture because it's your furniture. And it's because they don't want the hassle of having to clear it out and actually maybe put new furniture in or get rid of the existing furniture. So it's an easy option for them just to leave it. And it's not always the best option. For me, for renting property, I do not do furniture. The nearest I'll get to is I've got an integrated oven, hob, and extractor, and then I've possibly got a washing machine that's integrated. In some of the properties I do actually, and there's maybe been a fridge freezer there as well. But fridge freezers maybe left from the previous tenant. The washing machine's maybe left from the previous tenant. We just check it's compliant and it's okay to use, and then we'll just pass it on to the other tenant. And so they can have it.
We gift it on to the new tenant.
So we gift it on to the other tenant if they want to use it. Otherwise, we'll just take it out and get rid of it. Because
it takes that liability away.
And the reason for that is because we used to get huge advantages in terms of tax, the 10% wear and tear allowance, if you did furnished properties. And the 10% wear and tear allowance was a huge advantage to me personally. Hence the reason why I provided furnished properties. The day that stopped is the day that stopped doing furnished properties. I didn't see the point anymore. There was no point in doing it. There was no advantage to doing it. Yeah, you can get the replacement allowance, but it's not as advantageous as the wear and tear allowance, which is off your top line rents, because you're less likely to replace a lot of the goods, the white goods. Hence the reason why they took it away, because they knew fine we were getting a huge tax advantage out of it, and they wanted more money into the coffers. The amount that you were actually replacing was far less than the tax advantage you were actually getting with the 10% wear and tear allowance. But it's gone, never to return. You'll never get them giving back things like that. No, you'll never get them giving back things like that. Once it's gone, it's gone. They'll be reluctant to bring it back unless there's an advantage to them, which I don't think there'll ever be.
Yeah, and it's true what you say, Jim. I mean, it's fine if there's maybe some white goods or the odd item of furniture, I think is fine. But for longer term tenancies, generally it's unfurnished, I would recommend. But fully furnished properties usually attract tenants for temporary homes in shorter term. That's why holiday lets things.
I don't want that. I provide a person a house, and they're the person that makes it a home, just to be a personal private landlord. And once it's their home, the only thing I feel I'm responsible for is the safety of the property, the wind and watertight of the property, and the compliance of the property itself. Other than that, what they do is entirely up to them. As long as they're not antisocial to anybody else, as long as they're not damaging the property, and as long as they're paying their rent on time, that is it. It is their home. Well, I'm not there to oversee them. I am not their mum and dad. This is a misconception about what a lot of people just don't understand. It's like, because they think because we own the house, we have some sort of jurisdiction over the tenant, and we should be telling them what to do. It's like, I've only given them a house. I'm not taking charge of the life.
Lives.
But there's a misconception. It's like, why are you not doing anything? Well, I'll tell you, for one thing, it's because the legislation doesn't let us.
No,
we've got our hands tied behind our back now, and we're hopping about on one leg. And it's going to be even worse. We're going to be basically have no limbs to walk on after the rent control legislation gets pushed through. So how do you expect a landlord to then landlord their business and look after the property if all these rights have been bestowed on a tenant who effectively doesn't need to pay the rent and there's no repercussions? It's almost 9 months to get a court date from the first tier tribunal. It was meant to speed up the process for eviction. And you can only evict people on the certain grounds. You can't just say, I'm evicting you. You have to have legal stature to do it. So they have to be more than 3 months in arrears. They have to be more than 3 months in arrears. You may be selling the property to that. But you can imagine a landlord that's got, 76% of landlords in Scotland only have one property. So you imagine one of them having to wait because their tenant doesn't pay their rent, and even can pay the rent, but they just refuse to anyway. And then you've got to wait 9 months just to get a date from the court with the hearing, and then you've still got to go through that. And then they might decide that they might not do it. I mean, that's a pretty frightening process. No wonder landlords are running for the hill and investors are selling off. And these are all the legislative requirements, and I'm going to be political about this, that Shelter requested, and they requested even more. So the government's done everything that Shelter requested. They've not gone as far, but they've done everything requested, and now we've got less stock in the private rented sector, and rents are going historically high, and homelessness is at a historically high level. So dare I say that Shelter has caused all this homelessness?
The irony of that.
84 million revenue generating charity, it doesn't build a house. I worked it out. It's something like 64,000 income per employee of shelter. 64,000 they absorb, every employee, £64,000, and they don't build any houses. They just talk. That's it. 64,000 for talking a year.
So yeah, I mean, and that the irony of that obviously shelter has influenced that knock-on effect into the actual housing of the
Done
country.
it in England as well.
Yeah. I was going to say Scotland there, but I know I was just going to say it's the UK.
The homelessness, the charity is supposed to prevent homelessness, is causing homelessness.
Yeah, I know.
You can't make that up, can you?
No, but yeah, and you're absolutely right about the unfurnished letting things for long terms. I mean, if people are looking to maybe let for a year or something, if they have possibly got a new job and they're moving for a year, possibly slightly more, it might suit them better. But then you might struggle to do that on a PRT, a private residential tenancy in Scotland, because people might not want just 8 or 12 months or whatever, you know. So you need to watch with that. And also as well, you've got that added hassle of furnishings, and especially upholstered furnishings, like the anything that's manufactured after 1950, including mattresses. Mattresses is a bit of a subject that I always recommend. Definitely no mattresses. But anyway,
I'm not a big fan of providing mattresses, only if it's brand new to someone. That's what I was doing in the very beginning. Yeah. And unless you've got a long-term tenant, the mattress is basically a write-off when the person moves out. Unless you put a mattress protector on it beforehand. And I've tried all these things in the very beginning. Again, as I said, it was to get the wear and tear allowance, but now it's gone. There's no incentive to do it anymore. No. I don't think there's any incentive to actually do it, because to furnish a property and to leave your furniture, because what happens, you're exactly right there, Richard. It's really furnishings is for short-term lets as such, but the PRT, which is a private residential tenancy agreement, actually has an open-ended lease. Yeah, so you're going to provide furniture for someone, and then they're basically going to stay there for quite a long time. You're going to have to renew it over time, because there's certain parameters on wear and tear and how long things should last. So you might end up having to do all as a result of that. So you know, the fire safety labels after 1950, will they actually still be on these things, the tickets? Very unlikely. The vast majority of lettings are unfurnished because it reduces the potential damages and the disputes. But you know, call us and talk to us about if you've got the best option, and we'll talk about the best option for your home. It's all about that, really.
It is quite a common topic of conversation when I meet with landlords and things, is to think about the when they think about the furnishings in the property, and you have to obviously advise them, and more than likely what we've just discussed is what I go through with them. And there was one I had the other day, and there was a sofa, and they were going to leave it. And while we were in the property, I had a look, no fire tickets. I went, I'll have to go. So yeah.
Okay, so that then brings us to the most important aspect to this, which is finances. Finance is the most important thing. I mean, money worries or budget blowing surprises don't have to be a part of renting out your home. And you can really set yourself up to take everything in your stride, and some preemptive financial planning, and making sure that's actually done in advance. This is what I do every single time. This is why I operate my financial freedom blueprint system, and I just stick to it every single time. It is a formula for success. It works every time. It is a no-brainer. I don't need to think about it. It's actually been really boring, but I tell you what, boring pays well if you get it right. So
what about
if you have a mortgage? Yeah, you were going to.
I was going to say
mortgage finance and all the rest of it. So if you've got a mortgage, check if you'll trigger the early repayment penalty. This is talking about if you've got your house just now and you're living in it and you decide to rent it and actually move on. Check it. It will not trigger your early repayment penalty if you need to switch to a buy-to-let product. It may also have an arrangement fee and a higher interest rate as a result. Now, a lot of lenders I know in the credit crunch in 2008, 2009 actually said, all you need to do is get permission from us, and we're okay with just using the existing product that you've got just now. But you don't know what it's like just now in this kind of market where they're looking at advantages to take advantage of people in order to get more income. You can see the arrangement fees on buy-to-let mortgages just now, historically high in the beginning, but the 5-year fixed rate deals are historically low in comparison to base rates. There's no surprise about that because the arrangement fee is added on to the actual cost of the mortgage, so therefore you don't pay it in the beginning, and that keeps the monthly payments down to a tolerable level for the next 5 years. That's why they've got it. So when you think about an arrangement fee of 3% over 5 years, you're effectively adding 0.6 to the mortgage every single year, but you're adding it onto the mortgage itself. So you're adding 0.6. So rather than actually them saying, I tell you what, we're going to give you a 5.6 mortgage over the next 5 years, we're going to give you a 5% mortgage, but we're going to give you 3% arrangement fees in the very beginning. So that's the sort of thing that they're doing. But check out for the early repayment. I'll be honest. I'll say it. I'm a big fan of just maybe not saying anything.
I was just going to say,
I'm not condoning that, by the way, but if it was me, I would maybe consider that seriously. What do they care? It's just an arrangement between you and the bank at the end of the day. It's your arrangement. It's no anything other than that. It's a contractual agreement, and you're agreeing to live in that home and everything like that. But who's going to know if you're paying the mortgage and you're paying it off? Let's be honest about that. And yeah, I'll get the haters that'll castigate me for that and all the rest of it. But hey ho, it's the way it goes. But I would seriously, if you're wanting to get a start, you're going to have to do something in the beginning. This is the old Richard Branson thing. It's like, just do it and ask for forgiveness later. That's the sort of thing.
You can get consent to let fairly easily, and that
you can. But I tell you what you should do when you go on. Here's my advice. What you should do is you go on. Do not divulge your name at this point in time, and do not divulge your mortgage account number. All you need to say to your bank is, I'm just doing a general inquiry. I've got a standard residential mortgage. How easy would it be for me to just keep the existing product and rent my property? That's all you need to ask them. And they just say, well, have you got your name? Have you got your mortgage number? Just say, well, at this time, it's just exploratory. I'm only interested in that. You might want to give them it, but it's just exploratory. So explain that to them, and then they'll give you a good idea about where you stand. And then even if they say no, you're just going to do it anyway. Sorry. It's like I'm teaching people just not to bother. Hey. So it's the only way. Listen, if you continually follow the rules for the rest of your life and you don't see some flexibility in them, I don't think you're going to get anywhere. You're going to be stuck in a system which is designed to create really good worker ants.
I think as well, if you're only doing it for that short period of time, a year, possibly two, the world's not going to fall apart just because you didn't change your mortgage, as long as you're still paying it.
Yeah. I know. And if it goes to the degree that they actually find out you're not doing that, it's probably at the time where you're actually not be able to pay the mortgage anyway. So what does it matter?
Yeah, that's probably when they'll pick up on it. Yeah,
it doesn't invalidate your insurance or anything. It doesn't make any difference. Your insurance is still under a buy-to-let insurance policy because you've got a tenant in the property. So that's nothing to do with your mortgage. So it makes no difference. So you're maybe no living up to your agreement with your bank or your lender, but are you bothered? And then when you get out of that deal, then you can move on to a buy-to-let mortgage once you're out of that deal.
Yeah, you could then transfer over at that point.
Other things to think about, in addition to the cost of management, maintenance and repairs, you can claim back the flat rate of tax, the 20% on your mortgage interest payments on a rental property, if it's owned in your own name. But if it's owned in a limited company, if you had actually transferred it to a limited company, or just by chance, we're assuming you're actually living in the property, so it's unlikely it'll be in a limited company. But if it was in a limited company, you transferred it to a limited company, you'd be able to deduct the whole mortgage interest against the income coming in. That's what you do. But if it's in your name, you can only deduct under Section 24 of the Finance Act a 20% tax credit. What do I mean by a 20% tax credit? Well, if you've got £100 rent or £1,000 rent, for example, because I'm going back to the days when I first started, £100 rent, it's like that's a week now. So if you go back to £1,000 rent a month, if you got £1,000 rent a month and your mortgage is £500 a month, okay, in interest only, just to keep it simple, Under limited company, it would be £500 you'd be taxed on. 1,000 minus 500. Under your personal name, you'd be taxed on the £1,000 added onto your income, your PAYE and everything else. You'd be taxed on that first. So if you're on a 40% rate, then you'll pay 40% of that amount. And then you're only given 20% of the 500 off. So you could end up paying 40% of the 1,000, which is 400 quid, but then you could only get 20% of the 500 off, which is effectively about 100 quid. So you'd be paying £300 more tax, if that makes, if that makes sense, £300. Whereas under the other one, the 1,000 minus the 500 times 0.25, you'd only pay £125 tax under limited company, because it's corporation tax at 25%. So it just shows you there's advantages to do that, right?
Yeah.
Probably the third one I think about you need to consider in your finances. If you're buying another property to live in, you'll need to pay the second home tax duty. There's a lot of people actually on forums just now saying it's like, if I move house and I keep the existing house to rent I used to live in, can I get the land and building transaction, ADS? The additional dwelling supplement. Do I need, because it's going to be my next principal private residence? The answer to that, as far as I'm aware, is actually, and it's been asked loads of times, it's been answered like that loads of times, is no. You'll have to pay it. You'll have to pay the additional dwelling supplement. So that's one of the disadvantages.
Unless you then sell the initial property within a certain period of time.
I think it's 18 months, but it might be a wee bit longer just now because they're still trying to work through all the backlog.
Sure, it's 18 months.
And the tax, so you can claim it back as a result of that if you sell your existing property within a certain period of time, according to the rules. So look that up.
Victor's jumped in the comments saying it's interesting we said about not getting lender approval. That wasn't our professional advice, Victor. It was just plain.
Just don't. It's like. It's only an agreement between you and the lender at the end of the day. It's entirely up to you what you do. But if I was a lender, would I bother? If you're paying the money down, and you're a needle in a haystack, according to that, so it's entirely up to yourself.
So what about insurance then, Jim?
Just for my lenders, by the way, I don't do that. Just in case any of my lenders are actually, in case Paragon or Shawbrook or anything like that is watching, it's like, I don't do that at all. I comply with all the rules and I'm doing it. But here's one everybody needs to know from before, and this is to give you a great example of that. Do you know when buy-to-let mortgages started out, and a lot of buy-to-let mortgages maybe still do, in their terms and conditions, it says you cannot rent to somebody on universal credit, on benefits. And that still exists. And some of the products I've got, and it's like, everybody does. But I bet you didn't know about that. So everybody that's castigating me right now is probably going to have to take a real good look at themselves. Because you're probably still breaking the rules anyway of your mortgage conditions.
Yeah.
I rest my case. So protect yourself from, so as the old thing about, as you're pointing the finger, there's 10 pointing back. So protect yourself. Landlord insurance is definitely the one for me. Now, your home is essential because it's your biggest tax-free asset. If you have a fire in there, you're not properly insured, or you have a flood in there, you're nailed for thousands, tens of thousands of pounds. I've had somebody recently actually wrote to me and said, we've had a flood and it's going to cost £93,000. What? Have you got Buckingham Palace or something? It's like £93,000. Yeah. And it's like, that's horrendous. If you think about if somebody's had that flood and they've damaged their whole property and they're getting a quote of £93,000 to rectify it, if you're not properly insured and covered by a proper landlord insurance policy, which covers you for all tenures of tenant, in other words, professional, students, important students as well, and then also people on benefits. These are the sort of things you need to cover for. And also, if you've given it to the council and the private sector leasing to rent for you, you cannot use a normal landlord's policy to do that. You have to use a different type of policy to do that. And that costs you about double the amount of money. But it's because you're no longer in control of the tenant, the council is. And that's why you need that policy. And it's a lot more risk to the insurer if you're not in control of it and the council is. I don't see it like that, but it's obviously an opportunity for them to make money, I suppose. And these are, a good landlord's insurance policy, which it will have public liability, it'll have rent protection policies in case of accidents, it'll have injury claims, it'll have, maybe for some people that's got rent guarantees, your tenant no paying the rent included in it. So these are the sort of things. And also it has contractor liability. In other words, it has public liability, but you sometimes have policies. I do have it. If your contractor's working on the property and they hurt themselves, and they say it's your fault because of your negligence, then at least you've got some sort of comeback. You're covered for that. Incidentally, one of the things to watch out for insurance policies is, are you covered for legal costs? In other words, if anything goes wrong, they'll agree to pay it out, but you have to defend yourself and pay the money yourself to the solicitor to defend you in court.
Which could run into...
Yeah, a lot of them have actually taken that option off, and you have to buy that policy additional to what you've got as a normal landlord's policy. So just beware of that. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot of money. Mine's is like 250 quid a year to have that, and it's fine. But I fell foul of it when we came to Methilhaven Road, and the fact that, wait a minute, I thought I had that. You told me I had that. Now, luckily, they paid out, and it was all the rest of it was done, and that's fine. But that was a wee bit of a scary moment. And so, for people out there, learn by my mistake, and just assuming, it's typical. It's assume, us of you and me. That's what assume means at the end of the day. So do not assume everything's right. Make sure it is right, and just double check it's right. Even triple check it's right.
Yeah.
Probably the final thing for me, let me think, if I was going to say anything else, allow for one vacant month a year, set aside 10% in your occupancy rate to cover maintenance, repairs and all the rest of it, and maybe tenant changeovers. You know yourself, Richard, I do very, very risk adverse moves. I'm very, very risk adverse. And I make sure everything's covered. I deliberately, when I get a rental assessment, I deliberately look at the occupancy rate and actually work out where the numbers work. And the reason for that is because, the reason for that is because you want to make sure you're covered at every opportunity. You want to make sure you're covered if the rent stops. In other words, the tenant stops paying. Imagine the 9 months I talked about. If the tenant stops paying, are you going to be able to last? And then when you think about that, then imagine all the other things that could happen as a result of that as well. So, so you've got to make sure that you're covered in these instances.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and like you say, it's looking at the risks and stress testing your potential investment you're about to embark on to the limits it can go, and where you could actually stretch to, where like whether it's occupancy rate or loss of rent and things as well. Because then that means when you're in that situation how far you could go before you're in trouble.
Absolutely. Let's do a wee quick training and show people what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You can see that there. So here's my occupancy there. This is a deal I'm working on now. So just say we bought the house for £80,000, and then we've got 6% EDS. We're 25%, 75% loan to mortgage, so we're 20 grand down. We're 60 grand in. It's 5.54% mortgage rate. The rent every month for an 80 grand property is probably about 600, Richard.
Yeah, 650.
Yeah. 600, we'll take that as a tolerance, 600. So the payback here at this point in time, the mortgage is 46% of the actual top line rent is 12 months. Then your leverage position is gone, when you look at it, from 5% is extra. So your gross yield, in other words, a cash purchase is 8.1%. In other words, your rent divided by the total purchase price. And then your gross yield with a mortgage goes up to 13.5% in that scenario. So you're leveraging yourself by an extra 5%. You can see that in there, and just in this bit here. And then your overheads, I've always got 30% in. So you're a 6% net return, a 17-year payback. And that's assuming actually your legals would be 2,000. So it might be a wee bit more. See, payback's a wee bit better. So 16 years now, we've increased it by a month. So 2,000 for your legals and a couple of incidentals you're needing to do at the very beginning. So that's it, 26,800 all in to buy that property. Your net return is 6.4% with a mortgage and 16-year payback. So this is where I go on to say that what happens about the 12 months if I change that to 8. If it dropped to 8 and I was only at a lost 4 months occupancy, break even. See, there you go, £36 I'm on now. So break even's at 8 months. I'm very tolerant with that then. If the break even's 8 months, that's pretty good. to have that, because it's very unlikely that'll happen. What happens if the mortgage rate, now it's probably a 5-year, that is a 5-year fixed rate deal, by the way, but the mortgage rate decided to go up, how far could it go up before you break even again? So 8%. So it's, if the mortgage rates go up to 8%, which is about the variable rate just now, then fair enough, when you come out your deal, you'll still be okay. You'll still be breaking even. Now, remember, I've still got 30% overheads in there as a tolerance. So I'm breaking even with 30% overheads on there, which is insurance and using a managing agent and everything like that. And so these are all the different things. What happens if your rent, somebody moves out and they tell you what, the rents crash because something's happened, there's oversupply in the market and your rents go down. How far could they go down per month? Let's try a 1-bedroom rate, £400 a month or thereabouts. Yeah, break even, £36.
And then you could go on to look at your overheads to try and keep going. Yeah.
So you could go down and have a basically a 1-bedroom allowance in an £80,000 property when it's maybe a 2-bedroom. So, and then there's somewhere in between, you're 500. So you're all right. So a deal like that, 80 grand, there's actually a 2-bedroom property to come on right now, which is mint in Den Walk, actually, about the 80 grand price point. When you look at these numbers, you kind of think, I've been as well going out and buying that. That's a really good deal, because that will be occupied for a long, long time. So that gives people a real strong indication about where we are right now in terms of the market overall, in terms of the numbers. Okay, I've laboured that a wee bit with the numbers, but there is a bit on there about landlord tax tips in this blog. You can just click on to another blog that we did about the tax tips and all the rest of it, and I'll go into more detail as well.
Yeah, that's quite a good show. So
how do you create a trouble-free tenancy then? That's the point here, because I used to do that, but I'm not doing it anymore. So over to you, the professional.
Yeah, it's all about getting it right in the first instance. And do you know, when private landlords come to us and they have a problem, it all stems back to how they initially set things up and with their tenancy agreement. And it isn't surprising given the amount of legislation and things to contend with. So whether they've done the certificates wrong, do you know, I still sometimes get landlords coming to me and they've got, we've got the prescribed PRT, private residential tenancy in Scotland, and sometimes private landlords, they're not using it. It's amazing how some of them still don't. I got one just not long ago and it was a tenancy agreement that was on 2 pages of A4, and I'm like,
this is why I think the Scottish government, and it's not going to be a popular opinion here, should insist that every private landlord that self-manages is qualified to some degree as set down by landlord accreditation for Scotland or throughout the UK. And they should insist that. Otherwise, you have to get a qualified letting agent to do it for you.
And professionalise the industry.
Of course it is. It's an easy option for the government, because then they can just deal with letting agents all the time rather than having to deal with individuals who get it wrong. I mean, the more people involved in this equation, the higher chance of it actually going wrong on occasion. And it's like what you say, I come across like no smoke detectors, EICR's not even there, there's no gas certificate there, no Legionella test done, nothing, no electrical certificate done, and I'm appalled. And that's just the council houses. That's just the council houses.
Yeah, I know, and I've seen some of what you've just obviously run through quite often when people come to us from self-managing. And unfortunately for these people, the laws really doesn't leave much room for error. So if you really want to avoid fines, claims, or any damages and things, you need to get your property back when you want it. Then if you've not got the right tenancy agreement, you're not going to be able to do that. So make sure you get things right in the beginning. And there's probably 5 main things I'm going to run through just now that are the most important, but there is still more to go with that. Firstly, you need a valid energy performance certificate in Scotland to market the property on the lettings market, and you must provide the tenant with a gas safety, an electrical safety certificate before the tenant moves in. Now, usually we get that to them the day before they move in, ahead of the actual exchange of keys and things, and keep them up to date. Now, your gas certificates on an annual basis, your electrical safety, which is an EICR, electrical installation condition report, that's every 5 years. So you need to think about that. These are really important and the most paramount ones. But also, in addition to that, all your rental properties must have smoke alarms and carbon monoxide. These are, like you say, Jim, you've come across some that don't have the smoke alarms or the carbon monoxide, or they're out of date. Smoke alarms are 10 years, and they must be tested On the day of the tenancy, our inventory clerk actually tests them all the day, just and does the inventory and things, and writes all that they've been tested on the check-in. So that's quite good. Even if they were tested the day before as well.
Yeah, so there's a
This is
energy performance certificate, I would say. So
Yeah.
just give everybody an insight into what the certifications and validate is.
Yeah, that's the most important. And we don't put anything on the market without the landlord registration number or the temporary one while it's in process, and the EPC, because they all go on the listing, and that is what we have to abide by as letting agents.
Yeah.
So but whether you're a private landlord or using a letting agent, you must have an EPC. Tenancy deposits as well is a really important one, and you still find people that come to me and they deposit, I've got it sitting in my bank. That is not what you should do now. The tenancy's deposit must be protected in a government approved scheme, and it must be banked within the 30 days of the tenancy starting. And the proof of that must be supplied to the tenant within that time frame as well. So I mean, that's really important, and you could get a big fine and penalty for not banking your deposit in a registered deposit scheme.
I'll be honest, it's low-hanging fruit for anybody who wants to claim.
Yep.
It's like, because if you've not done it properly, you can get up to rent 3 months, 3 times worth the deposit actually paid out to you as a tenant, because just because your landlord's not done that, and I've seen it happen. I mean, that's it's a bit draconian, but they were obviously trying to just prove a point of the fact that your deposit should be lodged with a custodial scheme, which is quite right.
Yeah.
I mean, some landlords actually used to use the deposit actually, as just as a slush fund for them for doing repairs and improvements. I know some letting agents are actually no longer here and went out of business because when the custodial scheme came in, it's like, oops, we've spent all the deposits.
We spoke about this the other day, actually.
Yeah.
They packed their case and jumped on a plane, and at that point, So I mean, it does happen and it does go on, but keep yourself right, definitely. Tenancy agreements, of course, now here in Scotland, we have the private residential tenancy, which is a template issued by the Scottish Government. You can download that, the extensive version. I think it's about 38 pages. There is the mandatory clauses in that only need to be in there, and then you could have your own version, which we do, which we feel is a lot better and more accommodating to how we operate. But across the country, in England and other parts, you could get off-the-shelf tenancy agreements and things. And some landlords in Scotland don't understand that the PRT is in place and think that they could just download. Like, I've had a couple of pages before.
I used to have it in the beginning. You used to go to John Menzies or W.H. Smith,
and
you would buy a tenancy pack, and I tell you what, it wasn't worth the paper it was written on.
No,
because it wasn't even a Scottish short assured tenancy. It was some fandangled thing. It was a Plan England, and the irresponsibility of even W.H. Smith or John Menzies actually stocking that in Scotland as if it's a legal product in Scotland, and it was nothing to do with it. So I just ran with a tenancy agreement that I actually originally got from a solicitor, and then I made sure it was beefed up a bit in terms of the conditions. But they're on the contractual conditions. When it comes to it, yourself, the tenancy doesn't mean anything at all. The Housing Scotland Act kicks in and actually takes over all the tenants' rights. So you can say you've not done the garden, you've not done this, you've not done that, you better get it done. But the reality is, if the tenant doesn't do it, you can't do a damn thing about it.
Yeah, definitely. But I think if you're listening and you're in England and things as well, I think it's always to remember that agents tend to use a lot more comprehensive and watertight contracts and things. Even if you want to self-manage, get the agent and pay them to do the paperwork correctly.
I think it's a case that they've come through all the different pitfalls from before. So they understand all the pitfalls before, especially an agent that's been a letting agent for a lot of years and knows all these pitfalls, experienced them all, gone through them all possibly. So you want somebody like that. It's more or less battle scarred, if that makes. And I'll be honest, it's kind of like battle scarred. When I started out renting property, it was like the Wild West.
But then you learned the hard way through your own mistakes, and that's why you know that. And it's like, So listen to the people that have trodden the path before you, I think, is the best advice. And I did touch on inventories there, and unless your tenant signs a really detailed and comprehensive inventory at the outset, then when you make your mid-tenancy inspections, you're unlikely to win any claim at the end when you try to claim against the security deposit, because you don't have that initial inventory, you don't have these intermittent inspections that clearly demonstrate how the property was handed over, how it's been looked after, and how it was handed back. And that's the best way to win a claim against a deposit. Now, inventories aren't mandatory, but I would highly recommend having them in place. And taking that time just to get all these things right, and the foundational elements of any tenancy right at the very beginning, then you're really setting yourself on the right footing to minimise the potential for issues that come down the line with any tenancy, that are preventable if you have the right measures put in place. And I say preventable, I mean it's not a cure, but it puts you in a much better standing to tackle these kind of issues if you come up against them during the tenancy, because you've done things right in the beginning. And then that's when we start to look at, well, I said if people want to still self-manage, use an agent to do paperwork and things, but do you want to self-manage or do you want to use an agent? And I think as the industry and the sector becomes more controlled by legislation and professionalised, I mean, not just saying it because I'm an agent, I think it's probably best for you to use an agent.
Well, I've probably got most experience on that, haven't I? Because I've done both.
Of course, you've done it yourself for years, and then obviously and got an agent in place.
So my personal preference on choosing a self-managing an agent, there's a point where you move from doing it yourself to using an agent, but you have to get that point right, and you have to understand why you're doing it. So here is my advice on when you should actually use an agent.
Yeah.
If you've got plenty of time on your hands and you've got time to learn all the legislative requirements and go on all the courses just to manage your property, then by all means fill your boots and do it yourself. Definitely. Because the time, you're no longer restricted by time, therefore whatever you earn in the time that you're no longer restricted by is enough money. The key and the point of pivoting to managing and using an agent, and it's not a black or white situation. It's not like I'm going to use an agent tomorrow. You have to transition into it. I'll explain why. So if your time is restricted and you are in a job or you are running a business which will make you more money per hour than it will using an agent to manage your property. What I mean by that, if it's going to cost you 75 quid plus VAT a month for somebody to manage your property and look after the tenant and take all the hassle out, and know all the legislation, because remember, you've got to put hours and hours and hours of effort into this to know all the legislation, then you want to use an agent, definitely. If you're going to portfolio build, you're probably want to go and use an agent, unless you've got all that time on your hands to do that. That's when you use an agent. But it's not a case that one day you wake up and you say, I've got no more time, I'm going to start using an agent, and that's going to do it. You have to get the right agent. The agent, because I tried maybe 3 attempts with 3 different agents. I tried with the original owner of the company that I have just now. You know, all these years ago, back when I first started, I tried with the original owner of this company, and I actually tried to get him to follow my way and actually do it the way I wanted him to do it, and he just couldn't do it. And then I ended up getting a franchise organization, a major one who has a guy's first name. We'll give you a hint. I tried to get them to do it as well and operate the way I wanted them to operate, and they just fell short because they were doing things like, I remember the one instance was, I got to the end of the tenancy. They finally moved out, and I actually thought I'm going to visit them just to make sure. And then I found out that when I said go ahead and change the bath 9 months before, that agency hadn't actually changed the bath at all, and they blamed me for it. Hello, really? So that was another one. And then there was another organization that I tried to get to do it as well, and they just didn't do it as well. An external. So I got a managing agent who was off-site, who was, one of these hubs that you get. People say, oh, they're down south and they could look after everything. It's like, all right, okay, so how are they going to visit the property and make sure everything's all right if something goes wrong and knock on somebody's door? They're down south. There's somewhere remote. So I tried these different things, but I couldn't get that. So that's why we formulated our lettings division. It runs with our company right now. And that's the most important thing to me, because that's how I would want it run. And that's how I want my tenancies run. And because I sit down with the property management once a month now, actually, because my daughter actually sits down once a week with them and goes through her portfolio and makes sure everything's on track. And I've taught her how to do that. See how you set yourself free by getting other people to do it with you, not for you, and to do it with you, to support you in these services, because if it's repetitive stuff and you can teach someone else to do it and you can pay them a lot less than what you can earn, then why would you be doing it? That's what a lot of landlords who choose to self-manage don't understand. And then they wonder why they can't set themselves free. They wonder why everybody like me goes, well, I'm sitting on the beach, in Spain while I'm making money. And when I come back from holiday, I've probably made even more money than I've made before. And I've not even done anything for it at that point in time. I did everything in the beginning, like a book, writing a book, and you get all the royalties. Well, I did everything in the beginning. I set all these tenancies up and all these properties, and I put them all together and financed them all. And then I get someone else to run them with me, like you, Richard, and your team. And that, for me, will set someone free. But a lot of self-managed landlords just don't get it, and they wonder why they don't understand that transitional leap, because what they do is they completely rely on the income every single month to keep them going. They give up their job and go, woohoo, I'm free. No, you're not. You've got another job.
You've got another job.
And you've got less security now because you've no longer got sick pay because you're actually self-employed. And you've no longer got a pension because you're actually self-employed. And you've not, so you have to provide for, and you've not got holidays which are paid either because you're actually self-employed. How crazy is that idea? But people have this vision that they've got to do that. So you get to a point where you can actually manage to, you work your job, you get the letting agent to do that at the same time, and you transition to that, and you pass over to them, you get them to do it. You still continue to work your job, and you still continue to work your job, and none of your income comes, your day-to-day income comes from that portfolio you've got, and therefore that starts to build wealth, because you just then leave it like a fund, and then it starts to build in money, and it's used for all the repairs and improvements and everything you've got to do. But there's money left over that you then go and buy more property, because you've not got the funds to do it because you're working in your job, but you're not actually working full time in your property business anymore. That's the objective, to build wealth. It's not self-managing, trust me, because it takes a hell of a lot of time and effort.
While you're on topic, that's what we're going to explore on Monday in the Wealth Creation Show, is wealth preservation, and kind of handing the baton over and educating for your portfolio and things to continue without you, and just what you just spoke about.
You know what? It's the hassle factor as well. See, the self-managing agents and all the rest of it, and we are going to talk about that more, so watch out for the Wealth Creation Show on Monday. But you see, here's a classic. The property portals like Rightmove and Zoopla don't accept private adverts. So you have to rely on Gumtree and Facebook. And I'll be honest, if you're relying on Gumtree, it's not the greatest one, because you'll get a hell of a lot of people inquiring who you really don't know.
Unqualified people.
You're fielding calls, you're weeding out the best candidates, you're doing all the viewings yourself. That takes time, remember. You need a team of reliable experts as well. You need to build up things like reliable electricians, reliable gas engineers, plumbers, odd job referencing agency, inspections for mid-tenancy visits, emergency contact on site. If anything goes wrong and you're on holiday, you've still got to take calls. No one else is doing it for you. Handling problems, disputes as part of being a landlord, they can undoubtedly distract you from, by having to get involved with previous homeowners and emotional connections and all the rest of it, and neighbours getting at you all the time for it. It's like, these are all the things you've got to go through when you, and if you get that, it's like, oh my God, why am I doing this? This is why a lot of people give up, and then they lose their dream because they've not got a hold of it really. They don't hold on to their dream. They don't think about what the long-term objective is, and they just go, this is too much hassle. I'm just not being a landlord. And then tell everybody else round about them, it's like, oh, it's no worth it. Don't do it anymore. And then they start stealing everybody's dream. That's what they do. They start stealing everybody's dream because they all wanted to be landlords and they thought it was great as well. But they now listen to that person because it's they're in their peer group, and then they don't realise that they're stealing everybody's dream by telling them it doesn't work. Well, I'm here to say it does work, and it works very well, and it pays you very well if you get it right.
Yeah.
So unless you're managing multiple properties, it's quite a challenge to keep up with the current market conditions, rent reviews, what tenants will pay for, all the rest of it, all these different things. So, reach out to Richard. I'll just say that. The most important thing from there then, for me, Richard, is then we come on to say, what is the final thing we've got to think about in this aspect? And it's probably preparing your home for rental. And that's where you know more, because I don't do that anymore. You just do that for me.
Yeah, but I mean, when you bring it right back, I mean, we could talk about obviously the whole management process and your financial situation and things as well, but you really need to prepare that home that you've been living in order for it to be right for renting. And when you've been in your own property for years, it's easy to get kind of gradually used to things being the way they are. Wear and tear and things is something that you live with because it's yours. And you might develop that knack to maybe just avoid those small repairs and perhaps maybe no longer notice them because you've become so accustomed to them. But when it comes to renting out your home, a new tenant will be faced with all of these all at once, and they will pick up on them. And it will be quite annoying and disappointing for them.
Do you know what it reminds me of, Richard? Just to jump in there. It reminds me of when I used to be a cleaner. My father used to rotate us on certain jobs because he knew that you would get into a habit of cleaning certain parts of that office, and you would miss some other parts. You wouldn't. Now, I knew that, so I used to try and clean them all anyway, so I understood that. And then that's when he used to tell me off. He says, "We're not paid enough to actually keep doing all that. You can't. We'll not get perfection because we're just not paid enough to do it. You have to do it within the hours." But then they rotate the job because they know somebody's going to do it. It's a classic example. If you go to Costa and St Andrews, you look at the back on the seating, and it's covered in a layer of thick dust. And that's because they've got the same cleaner that does that all the time, and they miss that bit all the time because they're getting to that habit, like what you say. When you're renting a property, you get into a habit of just like accepting. It's like you miss it out, and it just becomes almost like the nose blind thing when you come to Febreze.
Yeah, that's a good example, because when you're in your own home, you do tend to just let things pass, the minor things. But if you're going to hand that over to a tenant, they're going to pick up on that straight away, and that's you not started out on the right foot straight away. So look at things like wobbly handles on doors and difficult locks and leaking taps, and cupboard doors in the kitchen that drop down, loose windows and catches. And these things will only get worse over time and then lead to a higher cost to actually repair them fully rather than just rectify the small issue at the beginning.
Ben was on us the other day about we're saying, why do you not get it brand new or something like that for something in the house? No, it was the fridge freezer, the Samsung fridge freezer, because one of the things had broken, one of the things that opens at the top, and I went, I could just repair that with drilling a wee hole and putting a wee screw through, and it'll fit and it'll be fine. He went, why do you not just buy another one? It says, you want to buy it like? And he went, oh, right, okay. I says, because it works. What am I bothered about? But absolutely, what you're saying, it's like if you give it to a tenant, it's going to be a different story because they're paid for that.
Yeah, so it pays to look around you and think, does this place need decorated, or are there some like maybe historic stains or marks and things, scuffs and dents on skirting boards and woodwork and things is quite a common one. Do you have really wild colour schemes as well? Just bring it back to neutral and whitewash things. Warm and neutral tones in that are really a friendly and welcoming vibe for new tenants, and it freshens things up as well. Walking into that paint smell, I mean, I think I was checking a property that we've got getting done the other day. When I walked into it all freshly done from what it was, I thought, God, and it was just such a great, like, the receptors of your smell and things when you walk into freshly painted houses or rooms is so much better. So yeah, think about that, and always arrange for a professional deep clean, or at least a sparkle clean if it's not too dirty, and that includes your windows and your carpets and inside the cupboards. If you've got a good cleaner that cleans everything, if you're providing appliances, make sure they're clean. Do you know that rim of the washing machine and the washing machine drawer and things as well? And these wee touches, or these small touches, that was my Scottish coming out with these wee touches. These small touches will attract the best tenants as well, because they'll think, God, this place is clean and tidy, it's fresh, and encourage them to live responsibly in it as well for a longer period of time. And it just extends your whole tenancy and tenancy relationship as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as maybe a final point, remember that wear and tear are different from damage. Do you know, tenants and yourself will create wear and tear, and damaging things is completely different. So even in the most fastidious tenants, can stop the process of time from aging your property while they've lived in it and when they've used it. So there's a big difference between that wear and tear and actually damaging things. So keep that in mind. And if you're not sure what that is, speak to an agent or somebody that knows what
this is why I say about, you know, people that actually buy one property, which is 76% of the landlord population in Scotland, go out there to earn an extra income out of it, but they fail to realise at some point in time they're going to have to put some of that money back in to refurbish the property. And then they go, but I've spent every single penny since I've done it. And then they say, we need to refurbish the property. We've no got money. And then they say, well, we're going to have to sell it off. I've got that. That's where I bought that 30 portfolio from.
Yep.
It's like they just spent all the money all the time, never reinvested, never kept anything aside. And when it came to refurbish anything, it was like, we're going through it all now. I mean, 10 and 20,000, 15,000 on each property, more than likely. Yeah, so it's exactly, and that's what you have to be aware of. It's like you can't just spend as a landlord. You have to take some of that and put it aside to invest for the future, for any repairs and improvements that you will need to do, because you will need to do them, because your house, the interior of your house doesn't last for, you know, ever.
No, it needs upkeep. Yeah, definitely upkeep and replacement and things as you go through time. And whether that's wear or tear or whether tenants have damaged things, it does need to get rectified at some point in time. I think nothing lasts forever, as they would say.
So let's wrap up there and say, you know, what do people need to know if they're thinking about renting their home?
Yeah, I think if you're going to be renting your home, then the things that we've covered today is everything that you really need to think about. And that whether that's from the first steps when you learn maybe the current prices and the demands of the homes and things that you're looking at, looking to rent out, whether it's your own home or whether it's just a potential boost in the rental income that attracts that higher caliber of tenant. If you're not sure, then obviously speak to the right agent. And my contact details and my email and things are in there. But the things that we've covered today, especially having the property ready, getting off on the right foot with the right paperwork and certificates, having your finances set up correctly, these are all key elements of doing it properly. I know we've done a wee bit tongue in cheek with the with the mortgage setup, but yeah,
we weren't doing tongue in cheek. That's actual reality.
That's reality.
I'll bet you there's a lot of landlords out there that have done this.
Of course,
you know,
yeah.
Just don't because it's like it doesn't really matter in the whole grand scheme of things. But the most important thing for me is actually get your finance right.
Yes,
if you don't get the foundation right, which is the finance and the way this is set up, then your tenancy and your property investment days are going to be over pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely have your ducks in a row and make sure you've stress test your investments so that it stands the test of time. And you still, even if you want to do something short term, while you maybe go away for work or things and it's your own home, still think about that financial aspect, because you don't want to then be in a position where you're struggling with your own home that maybe you intend to come back to as well.
Definitely.
Okay, no, that was great. We'll leave it there today. Thanks for everybody jumping in the comments and things as well. Thanks, Victor, for watching through for the duration. I think Victor says, I never stopped there.
From our guest from Australia, who has a fixation with Braveheart.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see that we've got overseas and things as well as our local guys like Victor. So thanks to everybody for joining. We will be back next weekend for the show as usual. We'll also be Monday 12:30. We're doing the Wealth Creation Show. We're going to talk about wealth preservation, and that goes right into handing over the baton and making sure your investments are set up for future generations and things as well. So that'll be good. So join us then. And for now, I will leave it and say goodbye to you, Jim, and everybody else. Oh, thanks for joining.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.